Good evening.
Good evening.
It's 6:30, and I'd like to begin the Joint Pupil Services Education Meeting for this evening. First, we hear from our attorney.
There is no public comment this evening.
Wow. Okay, so we'll proceed. Could I get approval for our minutes from our last meeting? Yes, yes,
So,
and yes. That's three. The fourth person is not here. Okay, so at this point, we have an engaging presentation from our Director of Pupil Services. I yield the floor to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Loretta, for coming.
Hi, everybody.
keep it down.
So I'm going to go through our 2021 PAYS survey results with you. Pennsylvania Youth Survey is what it stands for. The Pennsylvania Youth Survey is a survey given every 2 years to cohorts of students in 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th grade. The purpose of the survey is to give the district information about our current students' mental health, behavior, attitudes, and knowledge concerning alcohol, tobacco, drugs, and violence. We had about 3,000, a little over than that, students in the district participate in the survey, and that's been pretty constant for all the years it's given. It's about the same number of students who participate. Some overall findings before I go into all of the individual areas. Overall, we've seen a decrease in most areas surveyed for our students in terms of drug use and alcohol and tobacco use. The areas where we did see increases, we are still below state and national averages. Baseball waving. We need to continue to focus on our younger grade levels to ensure that we're putting the right protective factors in place for them as they get older and they continue to make good decisions. It does appear that what we have been doing has been working because we have seen our numbers go down. And overall, when I go through our protective factors and our risk factors as a district, you'll see that our protective factors are much stronger and higher than our risk factors, which is good. So the first few slides I'm going to show you are about early initiation drugs, alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. For early initiation drugs, 30-day use. 30-day use is going to be a good measure of students who are currently using. The next slide I'll show you is lifetime use, so you'll see those two areas on here. MTF, you'll see in the corner there. That is Monitoring the Future, which is a survey project that provides national information for 8th, 10th, and 12th graders. So you can look at how the district is compared to national numbers. Overall, from this graph, you can see that our cigarette use, oh, I just switched all the pages, sorry about that. One second here. Our alcohol use for 30-day across all grade levels was 12.1% of students indicating that they've used alcohol. That's compared to the state average of 13.4%. Marijuana overall were 5.1% of students in the district compared to 7% for the state. Overall, this is a decrease from 2019 where we had 8.8% of our students indicating marijuana use. As you can see with our 12th graders, they're going down in terms of their use, but they do continue to be higher than the state average with their alcohol. Early initiation drugs, lifetime use. So these are students who have indicated that they have used any of these drugs or alcohol at all in their lifetime, not necessarily in the last 30 days. Again, highest lifetime usage rates were seen in alcohol, which was 31.1% of the students in the district. This is compared to 34.8% at the state level. This number is down from 2019, where we saw 38.8% of the students indicating alcohol use lifetime.
Lisa, would you be okay
would you be okay if we ask questions
Oh,
as we
yeah,
went
sure.
along? Because
Absolutely.
there's a lot of data that you're presenting, and
Sure.
it might be just easier to speak up and ask questions as they come up.
Absolutely. Feel free to interrupt me. Tobacco and vaping use. Our cigarette use has remained steady throughout the years, with about 4.5% students indicating they've used it in the lifetime and only 1% in terms of 30-day use. Overall, we have seen a decrease amongst the vaping in the district. In 2021, 8.4% of students reported vaping, and that's down from 12.6% in 2019. The current state average for vaping is 13%. There was a slight increase in vaping amongst 8th graders. In 2019, they've reported 4% of them were using it. In 2021, it was 4.9%. The state average for vaping with 8th graders is 9.2%. In terms of vaping substances and what students are reporting that they are vaping, we have seen 64.9% of students reporting that they are putting nicotine in their vapes. This is above the state level, and 28.3% of our students are indicating that they are putting marijuana or hash oil in their vapes, also above the state level. In terms of prescription, over-the-counter, and other drugs, these include all of the drugs listed on this slide. Our use continues to be very, very low in these areas, with less than 1% of students reporting any type of use. So risky substance use and related behaviors includes the following things on this slide here, but I'll go through how students answered on the next few slides. So you can see that 4.7% of students reported engaging in binge drinking. That means drinking alcohol in the last 2 weeks. 2.6% of 12th graders reported driving after alcohol use, and 6.9% of 12th graders reported driving after marijuana use. This is higher than the state average. Access and willingness to use drugs. This is an important slide because of our students who are reporting use, 38.8% of them chose that they took it without permission from their home, a friend's home, or a store as their most frequent source of obtaining alcohol. The next most frequently reported source was friends or brothers, sisters over the age of 21 provided it to me, with 28% of students indicating this method. And the third most frequently reported source was that their parents provided it to me, with 26.9% of students indicating this method. So as you can see from this slide, students really are getting their alcohol for the most part from family members. 38.8% of students reported that, oh, I just read that, but you can see these are other areas of sources of alcohol for students. I ran through all the data on the first slide. So students who reported using prescription drugs, again, our use of this was very low, less than 1% of students, but those students that reported using prescription drugs, 44.4% of those students reported that they took it from a family member living in their home. The most frequently reported source was, the second most frequently reported source was that a friend or family member gave them to them, with 40.7% of students reporting that method. So again, students are finding and getting the prescription drugs in this case, from their house. In terms of access and willingness to use, overall 19.7% of students showed a willingness to use alcohol prior to the age of 21. This is down from 2019, where 24.6% of our students reported that they were willing to use alcohol before age 21. There was a slight increase in 8th graders willing to try prior to age 21 from 10.8% in 2019 to 12.1% in 2021. All other age groups, there was a decrease in the willingness to use alcohol. 10.3% of students indicated a willingness to try marijuana before age 21. The state reporting for that is 11.9%. Again, with this case, there was a slight increase in the number of 6th and 8th graders, our younger grades, who are willing to use, but a decrease in our older grades. Other antisocial behaviors reported on these slides, I'll go through them. Overall, 29.3% of students in the district engaged in some type of gambling. The most frequently used gambling was that they did it for like a sporting event or with their friends, a darts game or something like that. You know, hey, I'll bet you this, you know, you'll win or I'll win. So that was the highest reported in terms of gambling for this. Do you have a question, Bob? Or you just...
No, I just wanted to take a look at the
Oh yeah,
chart.
sure. If I'm going too fast, let me know too.
So as gambling has become something that's more prevalent, you know, in terms of just watching a sporting event, they're having commercials that are advertising online gambling.
Our numbers are actually down from
Right.
2019
That's not-
too. Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah. Other antisocial behaviors. Overall, 2.5% of district students reported being drunk at school. That's compared to 4.4% at the state level. Overall, 0.6, so less than 1% of students reported selling illegal drugs, which is less than the state average, which is 1.4%. So communities and school climate and safety. 42% of students in the district view things they are learning in school as going to be important for them later in life. This is higher than the state average of 41.8%. School was viewed as meaningful and important by 32.3% of students. The state rate for that is 32.4%. And 39.8% of students enjoyed being in school the past year. The state rate is 37.6. This, in terms of students being in school the past year, was a slight decrease in school, where they had reported 38.9% in 2019. That could be due to COVID potentially and some of the restrictions that were in place. Positive school environment. 90.1% of students reported feeling safe at school overall, which is very important. You can see from this graph how high our numbers are in these areas overall in general. At the state level, 82% of students report feeling safe at school. Involvement in pro-social activities. 89.2% of our students reported participating in at least one pro-social activity. And you can see from the graph on this what the different activities are that students are reporting that they are participating in. Violence and drug on school property. In the past 12 months, 9.7% of students in the district reported being threatened with violent behavior on school property. This is compared to 16.7% at the state level. This is down from 12.3% in 2019. 3.6% of students reported having actually been attacked on school property. This is also down from 2019, where 5.7% of students reported this. 2% of students reported that they had been threatened by someone with a weapon. This is down from 2.2% in 2019. And 0.3, so a very small number of students, said that they had brought a weapon to school in the last 30 days. That is down from 0.4% in 2019.
Yeah, I just had a question or comment about that. I know that percentage is really small,
Yeah.
but it's, and I think I did the math yesterday, it's like 34 incidents or whatever. even though that's really minuscule compared, given in the percentage, is there any indication of what kind of weapons that you're talking about there? Are they?
I can look up the actual question, actually, that they asked.
I know that can be tricky because anything can be used as a weapon, but I'm wondering
Right,
what
if it's like a knife
a
or.
knife, a gun,
Mhm.
any other type of.
Yeah. So I do have the actual questions here in front of me that they asked, so let me see if I can find that for you. Might just take me a second.
Laura, I don't know if you happen to know the question. I have it too.
Yeah.
That's my head.
Okay, I'll look for it. Here it is, so let me see. So the question just says, how many times in the past 12 months have you been offered, given, or sold an illegal drug on school property? And then it says, in the past 12 months, how often have you? And then it just lists everything. Been threatened to be hit or beaten up on school property, been attacked, been threatened, been attacked by someone. How many times in the past 30 days have you brought a weapon, such as a gun, knife, or club to school? That's all it says, so it doesn't specify.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't have more.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can we ask a question on the pro-social activities?
Sure.
So I feel like we've talked about this in some other presentations, right, about like trending and participation and even district activities, right? I mean, it looks like engagement is down in every category except employment. So students are, and I don't know that there's a direct uptick, right? So we're not saying kids not do activities and all of them are getting jobs, right? But the only category that went up was employment. So have we looked into that any more to understand like why we're seeing disengagement in terms of like sports and social activities? Because that's a pretty broad category of things, right? And I think it's interesting that like we're seeing more of our students feel the need to either contribute to their their family's financial situation or take initiative, to support themselves a bit.
Right.
So.
And I do think, like you said, as a district, we have been really looking at that. The only thing this was given in the fall of 2021 when students were, obviously still COVID was very big and up and running and students were at home, they weren't engaging in activities. So that's, yeah, exactly. So that's probably why I'm thinking these numbers have decreased since 2019. When we give this in 2023, it'll be interesting to see if those numbers rebound.
Yeah, the timing is definitely critical there. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I mean, I don't know for sure that that's why, but that's my, yeah, I'm sure that's a factor in all of it. Okay, thank you. So in terms of bullying and internet safety, 19.1% of students in the district indicated experiencing bullying in the past 12 months. This is compared to 23.2% at the state. This is a decrease in our numbers from 2019, where 23.2% of students reported being bullying. The most reported reason for bullying was that the way I look, with 36.8% of students reporting that they perceive that to be the reason. Of these numbers, however, 60% of students did report that if an adult sees it or they report it to an adult, it is handled immediately. Social and emotional health for our students. The most of our students that reported being depressed, which I'll go through in the next couple of slides, the most common depressed thought for students was at times I think I am no good at all, and this is reported by 30.8% of students. This is an increase from 2019, where we had 29.9% of students report that. 30% of students who reported being depressed reported that they felt sad or depressed most days in the past 12 months. That is a decrease from 2019, where 31.7% of students reported that. These numbers do continue to be below state averages for these areas. In terms of grief and trauma, 30.1% of students in the district reported the death of a close friend or family member in the past 12 months. This is compared to 37.9% at the state level. 8.7% of students reported changing homes once or twice within the past 12 months. And 3.4% of students reported having changed homes 3 or more times in the past 3 years. 5.6% of our students said that they were worried they would run out of food at home due to money issues. And 2.6% reported that they had skipped a meal because their family didn't have enough money for food. 2.6% said that they had lived away from their parents or guardians because they were kicked out, ran away, or abandoned. Of students who reported being depressed, 13.2% of those students had seriously considered attempting suicide. That is compared to 18.6% of students at the state level. Again, this number is up from 2019, where 10.7% of students reported that. So we are seeing an increase in mental health concerns.
You gave a lot of interesting statistics,
Mhm.
but there's no chart around the depression stuff.
I have some more coming up here, but yeah.
Okay. I just, especially like food security and things like that are just really interesting things for us to.
Okay. I mean, I could provide them too, I just didn't put them all in
Okay.
here, and, yeah.
I was just curious if you had them.
Yeah, no, I do have them, and I can send them to you, it's just a lot of,
No, I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Thank you.
There was so much data, okay. We would have been here for years, probably gone through that report. So I really ask that we have the highlights, but there's a lot to dig through. Isn't the entire report on the website?
I think just this presentation
Just this.
is, but I can provide you guys with more information if you want, for sure. We did this one. So, of students who reported feeling depressed or having depressed feelings, they were broken down into students that showed no depressive symptoms, moderate depressive symptoms, or high depressive symptoms. So the PACE survey automatically does that based half of how student answers questions. So you can see of our students who reported no depressive symptoms versus moderate versus high depressive symptoms, and the relationship to drug and marijuana use on this chart here. And then this next one is students who reported bullying and what their responses were to bully through text or social media and how they feel with depression, and then skip school due to bullying fears in the past year and how they answered those questions on the next graph. So our overall risk factors as a district, so students who, as they went through and answered the questions, students that are deemed through the survey to be at risk of drug and alcohol use or engaging in risky behaviors or mental health concerns, 53.5% of them reported low commitment towards school. 46.9% reported parental attitudes favorable toward antisocial behavior. 41.7% perceived risk of drug use. 40% was attitude favorable towards antisocial behavior. And then 15% friends' use of drugs, 13.1% perceived ability of handguns, 12.5% reported interaction with antisocial peers, and 1.2% reported gang involvement. You can see all of the areas on that chart there that students reported out on. These are our risk factors for those particular group of students. In terms of our protective factors, which as you can see our percentages are much higher than our risk factors. 69.8% of students reported family attachment, 68.1% family opportunities for pro-social involvement, 64.3% family rewards for pro-social involvement, 58% reported individual belief in moral order, 52% school rewards for pro-social involvement, 45.5% school opportunities for pro-social involvement, 39.2 community rewards, and 30.8% religion. So these are some of our pro-social factors. Again, I did not list them all. You can see on the chart there how students are reporting, but again, just pointing out that these numbers are generally much higher than our risk factors. And then overall, the supports that we currently do have in place for our students and how we're helping them and building up those pro-social behaviors. We have our school intervention specialists, counselors, psychologists at all buildings. We have intensive outpatient program therapies, and actually at Ruston High School, IOP, where a mental health professional comes into the school and just basically rents our space to make that accessible to students. We have our APT program at all of our high schools. We have mental health specialists in all of our buildings, K to 12. We have our second step program, curriculum, in our K to 8 schools. We have our question, persuade, refer training, which is actually happening Wednesday. Thank you, I looked next to you. I almost said tomorrow. Wednesday for all of our 9th grade students. And we do this training with all of our new staff as they go through our induction program. We have our Safe to Say program, which our students and families do utilize to report things to us. We have violent risk assessments, suicide risk assessments, and of course we have Westchester Communities That Care that continue to provide programs and outreach to our families in the community. Questions? Lots to digest, take in. Yeah.
I have some questions. Excuse me, before we get to the questions.
Yeah.
Can you, and I'm sorry I didn't ask you this before, but can you give us our top 5 improvements over the last time we did the PACE?
Sure. I mean, I
What
don't.
you would say are the top 5?
The top 5, I mean, definitely our drug and alcohol use is down in just about every single area. I mean, right there, I think that would be 5 if we went down and broke out all the different drug and alcohols that are being reported. We definitely had our scores have gone up, I believe, in some of our pro-social, some of our pro-social areas too, in terms of what students are doing and how they're reporting them. I can get more concrete numbers for you. It'll just take me some time to go through and kind of pull all that out for you.
Okay. How about areas of concern? Like what are the top areas?
For me, the top area.
One of the things seems like the
Depression.
parents get, and the
Well,
parents
that, right.
coming up with the alcohol and drugs. I mean, that might be a problem, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean,
those.
Steal your thunder, but.
No, that's okay. I mean, I think I have those numbers from last year, actually, in terms of the parent one. But those would be the 2 main areas of concern. I would say, which we knew the increased mental health needs of students and, what they're reporting being depressed, not just the number reporting being depressed, but the level of depression that they are reporting, the symptoms that they're sharing with us, that continues to increase, and we do have, supports in place for students for that. And then, yes, I know, Loretta's back here, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know for Westchester Communities That Cares, it's really about getting that training to parents that students really are getting drugs and alcohol from their parents, from their homes, and the message starts there in the house.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
No, no problem. So I have a couple of questions. We'll start with just looking at the methodology of the survey. So we're surveying every 2 years, and we're surveying cohorts. So half of our students are never surveyed.
Correct.
Okay, and it's going to be the same group of students as they go through school who are always surveyed, and then the same group of students who are never surveyed.
Correct.
So that raises some questions about the fact that we only have information on half of our student body. And then it's a self-reporting survey, which raises the question about honesty, because we're asking students some really difficult questions and questions that have serious consequences. So I would go as far as to say we should assume that we're underreporting, because we can make the assumption that a 10th grader who's, using drugs, or a 10th grader who is doing something else that might get them in trouble isn't always going to be honest with us, even in an anonymous survey. do you think that that's an unreasonable premise to come from?
I don't think it's necessarily unreasonable. I mean, I'm sure there are going to be a handful of students that are going to answer a certain way. I know in terms of the methodology, you had said there is a way for them to, they do throw out certain surveys that they feel don't meet the criteria for how students answered, like
Yeah,
their
but
answer.
it's clearly they blew through it and put the same answer for.
Or, you know, words, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So to kind of help with that,
yeah.
but.
It seems like it might be good for looking at trends, because it's all gonna be relative as
Right,
they,
that error, the
The margin of error.
under-reporting or over-reporting on other questions may be
Should
consistent
be-
over time.
right, and over
Right.
universes that they're
Yeah.
surveying.
One thing that did really stand out to me, and we're just on the slide about bullying, is that we found that the responses about bullying, that over time it seemed like students were reporting less bullying. Now, that data is open into interpretation. Are they experiencing less bullying? Or are they feeling like no one heard them the first 17 times they said it, so they're going to say, no, it's not happening anymore. And that's an open-ended question that we can't answer here tonight probably, but I just think it's a thing that we should think about, that when you're surveyed about something that you've reported multiple times, eventually there's some fatigue in saying, yeah, you're not going to listen to me anyhow. And then the last thing I would ask is, are there concrete things that we plan to do with this data? Are there ways in which we're going to change policies or go forward with a certain plan of action based on the data that we're looking at?
And I think for, you know, like I kind of was over here with what we're doing to continue to support students. I think in all of these areas, we continue to look at all of the data, not just from the PACE survey, that's one piece of data, but everything you see here, and I'll do a presentation actually next month, hopefully, on mental health in the district, our safe to say tips that come in, our violent risk assessments, our suicide risk assessments, all the supports that we do provide students, and we use all of that data constantly to look at and talk about how we can get better, provide more supports, reach more students. And as our numbers in those areas that I just stated increase, it's actually good from a pupil services department, because that means we're reaching more students and we're getting more students to come to our service providers in the building and ask for help in all of these areas.
Thank you.
So one question about the detailed data. Do we have any transparency or visibility into the feeder patterns as a data set? Because, I mean, we have to acknowledge that we are a large district, one of the large ones in the state, and so what we see in one demographic of our geography may not hold true in another. So I don't know if that's something we can
So
explore.
I don't have that, because it's all completely anonymous in terms of the PACE survey.
Right, and one thing too, if the board recollects, we have made a commitment this year that we will be surveying students, parents, and staff at a mid-year point that we had talked about being the month of November.
Right.
And we thought that that would be very timely in terms of before parent-teacher conferences. And while those questions in the survey are not identical to this, there are several questions that do ask students about involvement. We are, through our effectiveness measures and our board goals, we are very much looking at those attendance rates, because that was an indicator, you know, that in terms of student involvement, that was concerning for last year. The discipline rates, I would also point out, Melissa, and thank you very much, a very thorough job tonight. But last year, if you recollect, that when we came into that December, January, and February, there were, and Mr. Thornton is here, there were a number of what we credible or non-credible threats that emerged through the Safe to Say system, that when this survey was applied last year, that was before we saw that, what I would just sort of say, spike in behavior. And some of that we know ties to social media. There were, you know, the TikTok challenges that were out. But thus far this year, those indicators seem to be in a much healthier direction. You know, are we where we want to be yet? No. but are we making progress? We are, and I think it'll be very important, again, to have that mid-year survey, and then also, as we discussed, the end of the year survey, we saw such a marked decline in participation because we were offering that survey in the middle of May.
Right.
Whereas this year, when we discussed with the board, that it probably would be smarter to do that early in April, perhaps before or right after spring break.
Right.
And see, we can get feeder pattern data for all, like some of those other areas, the violent risk assessment, suicide risk assessment, like the data we control. We can, safe to say it's anonymous, but we know what school it comes from, so we can certainly
We're
get
gonna talk
that
about
data.
that more next pupil.
Yeah, that's my hope.
I was just curious if it was something we even discussed with the testing administrator, like if they've ever done that with larger districts.
Loretta, would you like to, just you're from CTC?
Yeah.
Would you like to, would you like to add anything to tonight's presentation?
I can.
Please do. Please come up and feel free.
Not to put you on the spot here. This is really on the spot.
I'm sorry.
Moral support.
So you came all the way here, so.
Yeah, it was funny, I was just actually jotting a couple of notes, and there's, I'll just say a couple of things that I starred of the things I wrote down. One is, when we look at commitment to school, you asked what some of the, of our top priorities would be. And I think for us, actually, low commitment to school is a big one. Melissa showed that slide where everything's like 90%, 90%, 9%. We're like, well, why is there not? Why are we having a problem with commitment to school? The only thing that really kind of stands out as not being at 90% was feeling praised when they work hard, when kids work hard. And like Melissa said, we at CTC kind of look at that, not just, I know you guys all are looking at what can teachers do about that. We're looking at it, what can we do, people do in their homes about that, so that being praised for hard work is being mirrored at home and in school and on the soccer field and wherever. So for us, that's really important. And then on that point also though, if, you don't have to go back to that slide, but if you're looking at the data, it bumped up a little bit from 2019 to 2021, which means we're trying, and you know, we're working on longitudinal data, so these little tiny increments are good. The only other thing, I mean, one of the things I say all the time is there's a lot of areas we're looking like we're in good shape in comparison to the state. We say all the time we are hyper local. We really don't, it's nice to be able to compare yourself to the state. When I see our numbers go up for depressive symptoms, even though we're way below the state, we care about that, right? So we have the luxury of just looking at where we can make the biggest impact, regardless of where we fall in comparison to the state or the country. And then, yeah, I mean, I know there was questions about bullying. Bullying is way down. Like, it just keeps going down and down, and every chance I get to talk to young people, I try to praise them for their acceptance of people is getting, you know, they're really, generationally, I think they do a really great job of accepting people for who they are. You know, again, looking at the trends. So we care that most of the bullying that happens is happening in certain areas. There's data that says, you know, sexual orientation, gender, that stuff we have to look at. Kids who are being bullied, why is that? But it's really great to be able to say, look how low, and follow the trends and watch them go down. So that's it. Thank you for being on the school board, and thank you for being a great district to work with.
Thank you for adding your comments, we appreciate it.
Yep.
Melissa, thank you so much.
I just have
Are
one
there
more.
other questions? Oh, Sue.
I think it is critical, as you said, that we use all the indicators, safe to say, and all the others to put a piece together, a picture together of our kids. I've been listening to this now, I'm starting to sound really old, for 12 years, the PAYS report. And there is always a lot of drama around the PAYS report, and oh my God, we're up in this, but that. I don't think until tonight it sank. Everybody turn your thing off. I don't think until tonight that this sank in, that we're talking about 3,000 responses out of 6,000 6th to 12th graders, right? And that is the same cohort. We have heard in years past that there are as many kids who are underreacting to things as there are overreacting to things. And I can see many mischievous kids say, I'm gonna put this, and this down. I've done all this stuff and I'm faking it, I'm making it up. Who's ever gonna know it's anonymous? So that all has to be thrown into the hopper here. Now, refresh me, at what point in 2021 was this survey given?
It's in the fall, so October, like around right now.
Uh-huh, and we had just then come back, were we still masked?
We were still masked, and actually I believe our secondary schools were still virtual.
So, when you're asking me,
No.
was this a very, at the crazy point we were in the world at that time?
Oh, yeah, no,
We were in person.
And we weren't even in person?
we were, sorry, we were.
We were.
I'm like,
We were, but we were masked,
Still
right?
with all the,
yeah, I'm like a year behind, year and a half behind, so.
didn't you still have like lunch protocols, quarantine, there was still a lot in place, it wasn't.
There was,
Yes, Mrs. Mosley, there was still a lot in place, and if you remember, that we started to see the easing of restrictions in December when they changed the quarantine and the isolation period. And then if you remember in the latter part of January, even though, well, we were starting to see from the really big surge, we were starting to see a drop, but that's also when they ended contact tracing.
So my point is that last October, we were far from being normal. So I would like to go 2019 to 2023, because I don't think 2021, it's like all these other tests that were given while kids were in extraordinarily difficult circumstances, and teachers. So you're saying, oh, the teachers didn't praise us a lot. Who could tell? You're on Zoom. You know what I mean? And so who could tell who's bullying me? Maybe they're bullying me online, maybe they're calling my house, I don't know, but I'm not out in the playground seeing them. So this all, I think this 2021 PACE survey, with all due respect, has to be taken with some grain of salt, as everything else that has happened over the last couple of years, when we know the world was thrown into, your report was really good and clear and nicely condensed to not go, I told my husband, I'll be back at 10, because we're having a PACE report tonight. And you didn't do that, and I appreciate it. I think you got to what was important. But I do think that the other indicators and the other programs that you have in place and the people that we have in place, and I will take those people over an anonymous survey most days. So when you ask your staff and your counselors and your therapists what's happening and where's our need and who's hurting, that's where I would put the emphasis at this point, and that's just a personal feeling of mine. But thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Mrs. Tiernan. Mr. Darnell?
I just had one comment. On the page that talked about vaping, it really seemed alarming to me that so many, especially the 6th graders, are vaping and they have no idea what's in the vape. And I was just wondering, how do we address that? I mean, that's just frightening to me that they have no idea what they're bringing into their bodies.
I agree with you. We talked about we're trying to figure out if I don't know what that question was actually asking, but similar to the question you asked me beforehand, it's just if I have vape, like I know what I'm smoking and all those were choices and they can check all. So I agree with you, and I think we have to educate our 6th graders, and that's what I think I started saying in the beginning. Some of these pro-social training things really need to occur with our youngest grade levels because they don't know what they're getting themselves into right now, specifically when you look at that information right there. Yeah.
And our society can use that same education as far as food. You know, we eat snacks and we have no idea. I remember reading once that don't eat anything that your grandparents wouldn't recognize as food. There are a lot of things that we eat today that our grandparents would not recognize as food. So whether it's food or vaping, it's just really frightening that we don't know what we're ingesting.
I agree. It was a concerning piece of information.
Then one last comment, I was gonna say the same thing that Sue said, I look at the same thing. Most of the data wasn't that alarming because the increases and decreases were slight from the previous 2 years prior. But due to the timing of it, that's what I was thinking too, the data, you can't get alarmed by it, and again, it's your own assessment of it. The one thing though that is a little alarming is the social emotional, some of the feedback there, and some of those results are still concerning, but the staff, your organization's already focused at that anyway, so we need to continue to focus at that specific area, I think is the biggest takeaway. I say that is reinforced if the data is accurate.
Melissa, the mental health specialists, you had said one is in each school?
Yes, we have one assigned to each school. They're not necessarily full-time in each building, but each building has access to at least.
And the other question?
We have 12 across the district.
So they don't wait until there's a real crisis. They have some sort of procedure in place and...
Sure, so we have our MTSS process. We have our counselors, our psychologists, we have our intervention specialists who work with all students, and then as we get into a more intensive need for certain students, as we identify that, they would be referred to the mental health
So
specialist.
they're always included in all of those meetings?
Correct.
It's integrated? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your report.
Absolutely.
Are there any other questions? I appreciate the way you presented the report because you stimulated a lot of questions. So that was, I think we pretty much got an understanding of the top line. There was so much data in this report, my eyes were going cross by the time I was done reviewing it. So, and if there are questions that come up, we want to do a build on this. By next month, we'll do more on mental health, and that'll be support this plan. And I do appreciate what you said, Sue, about the data. I think Monday morning quarterbacking is good when it comes to 2023. Then we can look back and see what we knew or didn't know. But I think it's always good to have that benchmark of data, so you have something to refer back to. Okay, so in efforts to get us out before 10, why don't we move on? I think we're going to, on the agenda, it says the review of the Devereaux.
Yep, I'm next to it.
Okay.
Yep. So we are looking to add an additional support through Devereaux Behavioral Health. They would provide us with contracted services for bilingual therapists for our students. So we're looking for you to approve that contract.
Yes.
Yes.
And a yes for me.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, now we move on to our APT-SAT presentation.
That's correct.
We can hardly wait. We're on the edge of our chair. Thank you, Dr. Warner.
All right, so continuing our fun-filled night of data, we're going to go into the AP and SAT achievement report, looking at mostly scores from last year, but also similar to PACE, looking at some longitudinal data to make the best judgment and decision that we can. Sue, I loved your term. You said extraordinarily difficult circumstances. So we're going to see some of those scores tonight when students were taking AP and SATs throughout all of that. And a lot of these points of data are what I call like lagging indicators. So we're going to still see those impact in our next couple of slides. But similar to Melissa, if are there any questions, feel free to interrupt me. But I will go through this couple of slides. So we'll see. We'll start with AP, and we're going to do a breakdown with East, then Henderson, and Ruston. And for the next couple of slides, you'll see the tables and numerical charts on the left side, and then bar graphs on the right, really representing the same information, just different forms. You can see here that the lagging indicators is really going to be the graduating class summary. So that's going to be a 12th grade class for the year that is listed above. So if you look at 2022, the 12th grade class had 41% students scoring 3 or higher when upon their graduation. You can see as you get to moving through 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, you start to see students not sitting for the exam in 12th grade for a number of different reasons. Maybe they've gone to a college or university Anderson, pretty much the same kind of profile there. Similar to what we saw at East, there's a little dip there in 2020 and 2021 with participation. And the scores, what we are seeing those numbers go up most recently in 2022. And we've done a lot over the years to really get our students not only access, but also highly rigorous courses and leveling them appropriately and really make sure that all of our students have the ability to not only be in these types of classes, but be prepared to sit for these exams and score well. Okay. And then Ruston, again, saw some progress in 2018. Those numbers started to dip around COVID time, and we're starting to see those numbers get back to what we've historically seen most in 2022. Okay, so again, we're looking at students scoring 3 or higher for the past 3 slides. Next, we're looking at AP. Yes?
I just want to, the Ruston 12th grade number, that number has not seemed to really rebound like the other percentages. I don't know if you have any comment around that.
It's something that we're certainly aware of, those Ruston numbers. It's a priority for Ruston, and it's something that we're working on them, working with them on to get those numbers back up, for sure.
And on a similar note, it looks like there was actually a decline in AP numbers between the class of 2021 and the class of 22 at Ruston.
Correct, that's for scores 3 or higher, and you'll see on a couple of slides, the next couple of slides, you'll see that some of those numbers will go up. It's just looking at, I think, 11th grade right now, you start to see some of those numbers go back up, but I think in the next, not the next slide, but the one that is looking at Ruston scores, the number of students, you'll see the number of students are going up as well as those scores. So we just hold 1 second for.
Right, and Dr. Dietrich, one thing too about the year 2020, if you recall, that is when we were remote.
Right.
College Board went to AP testing remote, and they also brought that down to a 45-minute exam.
Right.
So one interesting data point there is if you look at that 11th grade in 2020, you see that at 31.8. Because of the convenience factor, we saw that, historically
and
right
then
there.
those students were seniors the next.
Correct. So it's a little bit of the 2020 is a little bit of an anomaly, and then as Steve indicated as well, 2021 was a challenge because the fall of 20 we were largely remote. We weren't sure were they going to test on keystones, and then students had keystone exams as well as AP testing, and under really difficult circumstances, and we still had a number of students who were learning remotely because they had that option. So it was quite a challenge that year.
But wouldn't those factors be the same for East and Henderson because it's a bigger dip at Ruston?
Yes, I acknowledge that, and that is something that we are consciously working on to try to improve at Ruston.
I mean, any insight into just the low numbers overall at Ruston? Like when you look at the AP Scholar, it's a significant shift from the first 2 to Ruston.
The trend continues through the next few charts.
Yeah, it's just, it really does stand off the page when you look at our 3 high schools that one of the 3 isn't matching up.
So can we continue?
Sure. And AP is a little different. I think it'll be a little more clear when we're looking at SAT, when we're looking at state and national averages, but we are just looking at 3 schools to make some extrapolate some meaning here. But you look across the past couple of years with AP Scholars with Distinction, that's students who have scored an average of 3.5 or higher, so we have almost 12% of our students graduating with scoring 3.5 or higher on all of their AP exams that they're sitting for. And AP Scholars with Honors is 3.25 average or higher, and then AP Scholars is a score, an average score of 3 or higher there. and these are those exam participation numbers that I'll dive into the schools a little more deeply. You can see the student numbers the number of exams have gone down somewhat at East, but those scores have gone up. If you look at the bottom right, the total AP students, percent total of AP students with scores of 3 or higher. Okay. Henderson actually had the students and number of exams go up over the past year, and we're starting to see those scores go back up as well to almost 76% of their students scoring 3 or higher on the AP exams. Okay, and then Rustin, again, this was the slide I was referring to earlier. The students and number of exams are going down here in 2022, and then the total percent of AP students with scores 3 or higher has gone up. So slightly less students taking the exam, but the ones that are choosing to sit are scoring fairly well.
Steve, any reason for the decrease in the number of students participating there from Ruston, why it's so much different? And also, it looks like most of them are rebounded in the total number of students, but Ruston still is lagging way behind, way lower. It seems weird. From 2020 to 2022, the numbers are still a big disparity.
Almost 30% less than the
Yeah,
other
a lot of
schools.
schools are almost back to.
I mean, they're equitable in size, right?
Yes, correct, they are, very close.
Besides reviewing this with the board, what's the internal mechanism for reviewing scores like this with your principals and your counselors, and how do you do that? How's that done?
The scores, the AP scores by individual exam are released to the teachers of those classes in the July period. So teachers have the opportunity to review that. Their principals also have that access to be able to review how certain teachers are performing as far as AP exam participation as well as AP exam performance.
Okay, so we're 9, however many there are of us tonight, very well informed people, because we're looking at we're having an overview. Do the 3 high school principals and their staffs have a chance to see this?
Yes, they do.
Have they already seen it?
I have not. I'm sorry, we're not doing it.
Well, you're not you're kind of new at this, right?
For
Sort
a
of.
couple of months. Sure.
So, Kalia, have their principals sat down and looked at the 3 and gone, whoa, look at us?
So one of the things you'll find from our indicators that we do take a look at the number of students that are taking exams as far as the higher level courses, how they're performing in that courses, how they're performing in those courses. I could tell you for all of our 3 high school our high school principals, that is a goal it was a goal for last year, it remains a goal for this year, because we know that by and large it has not been a rebound. I can say, in speaking with Dr. Morano specifically about some of these numbers, that was a point of emphasis as far as making sure that we have students that are not only not slacking away from the advantage of taking a higher level course, but to Dr. Warner's point, making sure that students are also sitting for the exam, because in some cases we have a double problem, not students taking the course and then also students not sitting for the exam. So we recognize that that is an area of need, and that is something that is a point of focus for this upcoming school year.
Well, since you're just sitting there, that's good. I think that kids are smart enough to have figured out that not every college is giving the same credit that they used to. So kids used to take 5, 7, 9 AP tests because they could then almost wipe out their freshman year requirements. And colleges finally said, oh no, we don't think we really want to do that. We're losing maybe a semester or a year of money. So they stopped giving credit automatically. Lots of them did it, and then all of a sudden they didn't do it. So the kids said, well, I like the AP, I like the challenge, I like to get a good grade in an AP class, and that's the sales point of AP. When the AP people come in, they want kids to take those advanced courses, because that's going to show the colleges that you can do rigorous work, college level work. But taking the test, that's just a pain in the neck, and it costs money. And so kids are saying, why should I? I don't blame them, really.
You're right. So typically what we find are 2 different scenarios where we may find a higher number of students that are taking the exam but not necessarily sitting for the exam. or is taking the course but not sitting for the exam. And so one of the things that we actually started to talk about just a couple weeks ago, particularly in preparing for our course selection guide, is ranking the colleges that our students are applying to, and then analyzing which of these colleges and universities are actually counting the exam. And that way we can inform students, do a better job of informing students to say, you're not sitting for this exam, and you should, because this counts for this college university. In some cases, students are. I would say that we would encourage all of our students to sit for the exam because they are preparing for the course. We don't want there to be a soft opt-out. However, we recognize there are students that are really fostering their agency and are being good consumers. They may say, well, if it's not necessarily going to be an advantage when I move to this college or university, then why should you? That should stay as an option. But we, but we do, I mean, I think to your point, that is something that we have to focus on as far as students wanting to attend to that challenge and to be engaged in those higher level courses, regardless if they're sitting for the exam or not. We want to promote and encourage all of our students to take advantage of our AP offerings.
Because I want to be honest, the AP is expensive. The AP exam, the AP people earn a lot of money, encouraging people to take those courses and get those teachers trained and take those exams, and that's all. I have some questions about that, but whether our kids actually need it, I think that will cause them to see more clearly, oh, I want to go to Harvard, and Harvard does give credit for, or I want to go to Fordham, and they do give credit for. So that's a very good step, and I think it will help more kids to be a little more, a little less reluctant about opting out and saying, I'm done, I'm just done with it. Because by the end of their senior year, a lot of them are done. Junior year, they're still in there trying.
Every kid is not going to Harvard or
Right,
Fordham.
but the point is, they're going to give kids a list of the schools that do give credit for those courses, so that they can say, I'm being foolish if I don't take that exam, because I might really be able to opt out of that freshman level course and take another one. That's good for them.
And to your point, even for students even for universities that may not count the exam for a course offering, they still want to look at a student's transcript and see that students are engaged in challenging and rigorous courses. So by and large, it is a point of sell for all of our students to continue to be engaged and challenge themselves in that way.
Yes.
Okay,
The only discussion is about getting out of the exam.
Along those lines, do we have any sense of, in a gross way, not specific numbers, how many of our students are choosing not to take the exam for financial reasons? And as corollary, is there any way to find remedy there, to help these students find ways to cover the cost of the exam? Because, I mean, it's really a shame if we have students who have taken the AP class, would benefit from taking the exam, and are doing it simply because of a cost barrier.
I think like dual enrollment, we provide that opportunity for students that have a hardship, like our activity fees. I think in some cases, it is a point of pride. I mean, it's tough for a family to be able to say, I need help. And in some cases, families may not know to ask. So I think to your point, that's something that we can underscore as far as these are resources that we have available. I know that our counselors and our teachers of those courses do put that out as an available resource and support, particularly for dual enrollment. But I do think that that's something that will never be at a loss in just highlighting that those resources are available.
Yeah, I like to joke that sometimes our children are unreliable narrators, and things need to not go through them, they need to come directly to parents.
Okay, thank you. Any other? I don't think you're
Finish
finished.
your presentation.
At least the AP piece is finished. We can move on to the SAT, where we do have some state and national data to make some good decisions from. But looking from the East Henderson and Ruston feeders here, you can look at looking at the 2020, 2021, and 2022 average scores, as well as the test taker numbers. You can see that we're consistently anywhere from 8 to 10% higher compared to the state, and then nationally we're about 10 to 14% higher when you're looking at our overall SAT average score compared to the nationwide sampling. All right, and this is just looking at very similar data here. It's the 2021 and 2022 SAT scores broken down by subject area, the English, writing, and language. It's ERW. You'll see that again on the next slide. And then math, same message here. Again, above the state averages and well above the national averages, looking at just those individual areas. Okay, last, certainly not least slide here for SAT demographic scores. Looking at the 2021 and 2022 overall English reading and writing and math domains by demographics as collected on the SAT assessment itself. So you see here 2021 to 2022, a slight decrease in just about every group, but notably the students reporting as Asian and Hispanic saw somewhat of a greater decline in their scores compared to their counterparts in other demographics.
So we've seen this in some data that we've brought to the board before, where we have a pretty visible achievement gap based on issues such as race. And it does seem like this is a thing that we need to address in pretty serious ways, and to start thinking, how do we get those numbers to match up more closely? Do we have any concrete plan in place for how we're going to use the data on this last slide here to perhaps address that achievement gap?
And just for clarity, are you speaking about the Hispanic population there?
I'm talking about the fact that we have that our black test takers aren't getting the same scores that we see in other racial groups, and that seems, from the data that we've seen in the past few months as a board, pretty consistent across the board, that our African American students aren't taking as many AP courses, they aren't participating in as many extracurriculars, and it's pointing to a systemic problem.
Yeah, and that actually, Dr. Dietrich, one thing that we have been monitoring very closely for a number of years, increased access to higher level courses, particularly for African American and Hispanic students, and we have seen that on the incline. One piece that if I would just go back, Steve, to it was the very first slide.
For SATs?
For SATs, right. So one of the things, and this actually just came out, I forget what the publication was, but 2/3 of colleges and universities are still maintaining for the SAT and the ACTs to be optional. And if you look back at the SAT, the very first slide, average score and participation, so you see last year, and that is the cohort of the students who graduated in 2021, we saw the number of test takers decline in comparison to the class that graduated in 2020. And most of those students who graduated in the class of 2020, they were able to take their SATs either the year before or the fall before the pandemic hit. So we are actually seeing an increase, even though nationally numbers have rebounded more so, they've rebounded within the district in terms of the number of test takers. So that is a positive thing to see, but I would like to take a look at just simply how we break down those different subgroups, how has the participation impacted over the past few years?
Right. And I'll attest that I have a 12th grader who is not planning to take the SAT because it's not required in any of the schools my child is applying to. They're taking the ACT, but all of their schools are test optional. But going back to the last slide, like if we just look at the line for our black students, we actually see a real decline in test scores between between years, from 1045 to 1029. And in both years, the average score for our African American students was lower than for our white students, lower than for our Hispanic students, and significantly lower than for our Asian students.
I think it's a point well taken.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And now that we have the data disaggregated, we can take a look at those various populations to see, it's not just about offering access, but it's encouraging those students to take that pathway. And I think that might be the missing element. Are there other questions on ACT, SAT, all the Ts? Thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you.
for your presentation. And we have another policy approval.
Just a couple.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I just have a quick update on the policy for our home education program. We are in our second read of this policy. The only addition that change that we are going to make from last month is under loan of instructional materials. It's actually on your board packet, page 55. It's the last part of that policy. And we are going to take out, remember, if Judy DeFonso spoke last board meeting, she recommended that we take out students' age and grade level, as that's not really appropriate to most of our students in homeschool. We were going to change it to the students' academic level, if they so choose to wish to borrow any of our materials. Yeah, I thought that was a really good suggestion as well.
Are there any questions?
Just going to need a vote on that.
Okay, can we vote? Your teacher.
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Dietrich, you said yes, correct?
Yes, we can vote, and yes, I vote
Yes, you vote yes. Yes,
Yes.
and yes, 3 yeses. Now we have Dr. Reynolds bringing us home.
That's right, for closeouts, we have 2 policies to present to you this evening for policy 913 as well as policy 913.2. And these are keeping in wordsmithing updates that we had over the summer presented for policy 220. So we are literally just requesting a update in verbiage from distribution and posting to dissemination. So you'll see that update throughout both of those policies for 913 as well as 913.2.
Thank you. Any questions? Can we get a vote on 913?
Yes?
Yes.
And yes.
Thank you.
Was that a vote for 913A as well? No.
Sorry, we got another one.
That's okay.
That was 913, so we need 913.2.
913.2. I'm
Yes.
sorry, I said point A. Point 2. Can I get a vote?
Yes.
Yes.
And yes, 3 yeses.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I believe that's our last agenda item. Thank you all for presenting and for your questions this evening. And the meeting's adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.